August 15th, 1943, Camp Hearn, Texas. Unteroffizier Klaus Weber stood in the mess hall line staring at something that made no sense according to everything he understood about military food service. The American cook, a large black man wearing stained white apron and working with casual efficiency that suggested years of experience, was dropping pieces of raw chicken into boiling fat. Not boiling them in water as German field kitchens did, not roasting them in ovens as proper restaurants would, submerging them completely in vats of bubbling oil at temperatures that seemed impossibly hot for food preparation that wouldn't destroy the meat completely. The process violated every principle of cooking that Weber had learned growing up in Bavaria, where his mother had prepared chicken through careful roasting that took 2 hours minimum and produced meat that was acceptable but never particularly interesting. Chicken was expensive meat reserved for special occasions. You didn't waste it through cooking methods that seemed designed to burn it. But what emerged from the American cook's vats was something else entirely. Golden brown pieces with crispy exterior that crackled audibly when placed on serving trays. The smell filled the mess hall, a combination of seasoned coating and rendered fat that was unlike anything served in German military or civilian kitchens. The smell alone made Weber's mouth water, despite his uncertainty about what he was witnessing. Weber took his portion uncertainly.
3 pieces of chicken, a breast, a thigh, and a drumstick that weighed perhaps 12 ounces total, more chicken than he had seen in a single meal since before the war. More chicken than his entire family in Munich would receive as weekly meat ration if they were lucky enough to find meat available at all. He sat at a table with other prisoners from his barrack and examined the food carefully before attempting to eat it. Think about that. Enemy prisoners of war being served food that they literally didn't recognize as food because the preparation method was so foreign to their experience that the result seemed like completely different substance than the ingredient that had gone into the pot. The first bite was revelation that would reshape Weber's entire understanding of American civilization and German deprivation. The coating was crispy but not hard. It shattered between his teeth with satisfying crunch. The meat inside was tender and impossibly moist, despite having been submerged in boiling oil that should have dried it completely. The flavor was intense. Salt, pepper, and other spices that German cooking rarely used in combination, creating taste that was far more interesting than anything Weber had eaten in 5 years of military service. Around him, other German prisoners were having similar experiences. Men who had been captured in North Africa and had survived months on minimal rations were now eating fried chicken that exceeded anything available in wartime Germany and rivaled the best restaurant food they remembered from pre-war civilian life when Germany had still possessed some prosperity before total war consumed everything. Think about that moment. August 1943. German forces were still fighting across Europe and Russia. German civilians were suffering under increasingly severe rationing. German soldiers at the front were receiving rations that barely maintained combat effectiveness. And German prisoners in American camps were eating fried chicken prepared with cooking techniques and ingredient quantities that would have been considered criminal waste in Germany. What Weber didn't know as he ate was that American fried chicken represented more than just cooking technique. It represented an entire approach to food, abundance, and culture that was fundamentally different from European traditions shaped by centuries of scarcity. An approach that emphasized flavor and satisfaction over mere nutrition. That used fat generously rather than sparingly, because American agriculture produced such surplus that using large quantities for cooking seemed normal rather than wasteful. What Weber didn't know was that the fried chicken being served in American POW camps was causing psychological disruption among German prisoners that exceeded anything that formal re-education programs could achieve. Because food communicated truths about American society more effectively than words ever could. Every bite was proof that American abundance was real rather than propaganda exaggeration. Every meal was evidence that capitalism produced prosperity that German central planning couldn't match, despite decades of promises about building superior socialist economy. What Weber didn't know was that thousands of German prisoners were writing letters home describing American fried chicken in detail that Allied censors deliberately approved because they correctly understood that these descriptions were more devastating to German morale than any military information could be. That German families receiving letters describing impossible abundance were beginning to question whether their sacrifices served any purpose when the enemy could afford to feed German prisoners better than Germany fed its own soldiers. What Weber didn't know was that he himself would volunteer for kitchen duty within 2 weeks, specifically to learn how Americans achieved such results with cooking methods that violated everything he believed about proper food preparation. That he would spend 6 months working alongside American cooks, learning techniques that would eventually allow him to open a successful restaurant in Georgia in 1956, serving the same fried chicken that had transformed his understanding of America during his captivity. What Weber didn't know was that the casual use of cooking oil in quantities exceeding monthly fat rations for entire German towns wasn't just abundance, it was deliberate demonstration of industrial capacity so vast that using resources wastefully was actually optimal strategy when resources were sufficiently abundant that conservation became less important than achieving best possible results. What Weber didn't know was that 40 years later, in 1983, he would sit in his Georgia restaurant and tell customers the story of how he learned to fry chicken as German prisoner of war. That he would explain that the first bite of American fried chicken in August 1943 had taught him that Germany had already lost the war because the side that could afford to cook this way for enemy prisoners possessed civilizational capacity that no amount of German discipline could overcome. The mathematics of fried chicken were being written in pans of hot oil across hundreds of camps, and those mathematics were proving something that German leadership had denied was possible, that American abundance was real, that American industrial capacity extended even to feeding enemy prisoners better than Germany fed its own soldiers, and that the war was already lost not through military defeat, but through civilizational capacity that made defeat inevitable. By the time Weber finished his meal, having eaten every scrap of meat, and even some of the crispy coating that had fallen onto his plate, he understood something that would reshape his entire worldview about America, Germany, and the war he had fought. The side that could afford to deep-fry chicken in massive quantities of oil for enemy prisoners was the side with resources so vast that victory was mathematical certainty rather than battlefield uncertainty. August 15th, 1943, 1300 hours. Klaus Weber's diary entry from August 15, 1943, preserved in the German military archives after being returned to his family following the war, documented his first encounter with American fried chicken in detail that revealed both his confusion and his growing recognition of American abundance. The diary entry stated that Weber sat at table in mess hall number 3 with 5 other German prisoners: Obergefreiter Hans Müller from Hamburg, Lieutenant Werner Schmidt from Berlin, Feldwebel Ernst Wagner from Frankfurt, Gefreiter Paul Richter from Cologne, and Unteroffizier Otto Hartmann from Munich. All 6 men had arrived from North Africa 3 weeks earlier, according to the entry. According to the diary, Müller was first to speak, stating that the food on their plates couldn't be chicken because chicken didn't look or smell like what they were being served.
Schmidt examined his portion and determined it was chicken, but prepared through frying in oil rather than roasting. Wagner expressed disbelief according to the entry, stating that the quantity of oil required to submerge chicken pieces would exceed monthly fat ration for 50 German families, and that Americans couldn't possibly afford such waste. The diary documented that Richter took first bite and chewed slowly with expressions suggesting unexpected experience. Weber recorded his own first taste in detail: coating that was crispy but not hard, meat that was tender and moist despite oil frying, flavor that exceeded anything he had eaten in 5 years of military service or in civilian life before the war. According to the diary entry, Schmidt analyzed the cooking technique while eating,
explaining that high-temperature frying created crispy exterior while sealing moisture inside. Hartmann questioned how much oil had been used to fry chicken for 4,000 prisoners. Wagner estimated hundreds of pounds, perhaps thousands according to the entry, more fat than Germany allocated to entire cities monthly. The diary recorded Weber's observation of the American cook working through serving window. According to the entry, Weber noted that the cook wasn't concerned about oil quantity and wasn't measuring carefully, suggesting that such cooking was routine rather than special. Weber wrote that if frying chicken in massive quantities was routine for American military cooks, this suggested industrial capacity that exceeded German comprehension. The diary entry documented Müller's statement that his family in Hamburg hadn't eaten chicken in 18 months because chicken wasn't available at any price regardless of ability to pay. According to the entry, Müller expressed confusion about eating portions as prisoner that exceeded anything his family could obtain as civilians. Schmidt's statement, recorded in diary, acknowledged that discussing politics was prohibited, but that the meal had taught him more about American economic capacity than any intelligence briefing he had received during 3 years of combat. The diary entry noted that guards approached to clear tables before further discussion could occur. Weber's diary entry concluded with observation that he had eaten every piece of chicken, including coating, that had fallen onto plate. He recorded eating approximately 14 ounces of meat in single meal, more than his weekly meat ration during many weeks before capture. The entry stated that he had tasted something that would change how he understood America, Germany, and the war, and that he wanted to learn more about how Americans achieved such results. August 29, 1943. Meanwhile, in Hamburg, Germany, Margaret Weber's diary entry from August 29, 1943, preserved in family archives and later published in her daughter's 1987 memoir, documented the daily struggle to obtain meat rations that contrasted starkly with her husband's experiences in American captivity. The diary entry stated that Margaret stood in line at butcher shop beginning at 0600 hours, hoping to obtain family's weekly meat ration. According to the entry, she waited 90 minutes before shop opened at 700. The entry noted 47 people ahead of her in line. The diary documented that family's ration card entitled them to 250 grams of meat weekly, but that actual amount received was typically less, perhaps 200 grams, sometimes only 150 grams, occasionally nothing if supply ran out before her turn. The entry stated that she was hoping for sausage because real meat had become so scarce that she no longer expected it. According to the diary, Margaret reached counter at 0823 and received 180 grams of mixed organ meats and sausage of questionable composition.
The entry recorded Butcher's statement that this was all that remained and was mostly offal with some sausage. The diary entry documented Margaret's return home through streets, showing increasing bombing damage from RAF night raids. According to the entry, Hamburg was being systematically destroyed and food was disappearing. The war seemed endless, according to her assessment. The diary stated that Margaret divided the 180 grams carefully among 4 people: herself, her mother-in-law, and her 2 children aged 7 and 9. According to the entry, children would receive slightly larger portions because they were growing. The meat would flavor 3 meals over the next week, when stretched with potatoes, cabbage, and bread when bread was available. The diary entry recorded Margaret's thoughts about her husband Klaus. who had been listed as missing since May following German surrender in North Africa. According to the entry, she had received no information about his status and prayed he was alive and receiving adequate food. The entry expressed hope that American captivity wasn't as harsh as propaganda suggested, but fear that it might be worse. Meanwhile, at Tyson Foods processing facility in Springdale, Arkansas, company production records from August 29, 1943, showed that overnight shift completed processing of 45,000 chickens raised in concentrated feeding operations that had revolutionized American poultry production during previous decade. According to the records, chickens arrived alive at 1800 hours on August 28th, were processed through automated slaughter and cleaning systems, were butchered into standardized parts using techniques maximizing yield while minimizing labor, were packaged in ice for rail transport, and were loaded onto refrigerated rail cars at 0600 hours on August 29th for distribution across United States. Company annual reports showed this single facility would process approximately 12 million chickens during 1943. Industry statistics compiled by Department of Agriculture indicated entire American poultry industry would process approximately 800 million chickens during war years, scale exceeding anything European agriculture had ever achieved or attempted. September 12, 1943. Klaus Weber's application for kitchen duty, preserved in Camp Hearn administrative records at National Archives, stated that he volunteered for kitchen work on September 10, 1943, and was assigned to work under Sergeant Robert Williams beginning September 12. Weber's later memoir, published in German in 1978 and translated to English in 1982, documented his motivations for volunteering. According to the memoir, he sought kitchen work partly to gain access to additional food that kitchen workers were permitted to eat from scraps and leftovers, but primarily to learn how Americans achieved remarkable results with cooking techniques that violated principles of German cuisine. The memoir described Williams as a large black man from Alabama who had been cooking professionally since age 14 when he started working in his mother's restaurant in Birmingham. According to the memoir, Williams had been drafted in 1942 and assigned to quartermaster service, where cooking experience made him valuable. Weber's memoir recorded Williams's initial greeting and question about whether Weber spoke English. According to the memoir, Weber replied that he had learned some English in school, not perfect, but adequate for understanding. Williams responded, according to the account, that Weber's English was good enough and that he would learn to fry chicken that day because 4,800 prisoners needed to be fed and chicken was on menu. The memoir documented that Weber stated he had never fried chicken before and that in Germany chicken was roasted in oven rather than fried in oil. According to the account, Williams laughed and told Weber he would learn the right way that day. Weber's description of Camp Hearn kitchen, recorded in memoir, stated that facility was larger and better equipped than any German military kitchen he had seen. The description included multiple industrial stoves with large burners, deep cast iron skillets and purpose-built deep fryers, enormous refrigerated storage rooms, and abundant supplies of every ingredient imaginable. According to the memoir, Williams showed Weber raw chicken, hundreds of whole chickens butchered into 8 pieces each. Weber calculated quantity recorded in memoir at 600 chickens minimum, perhaps 5,000 pounds of raw meat, more chicken than his entire hometown of 8,000 people would consume monthly under German rationing. The memoir documented Williams's instruction on frying technique. According to the account,
Williams explained that frying required temperature control. Oil needed to be hot enough that coating crisped immediately at approximately 350 degrees, but not so hot that coating burned before interior cooked through. Williams demonstrated, according to memoir, how to use thermometers to monitor oil temperature, how to adjust heat to maintain consistent temperature, and how to test oil readiness by dropping small amount of batter and watching bubbling. Weber's memoir recorded Williams's explanation of coating technique. According to the account, Williams explained that seasoned flour with salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder, and cayenne, created what made fried chicken special. Each piece was dredged in flour, dipped in buttermilk, then dredged in flour again according to the description.
Double coating made it crispy according to Williams's explanation recorded in memoir. The memoir documented Weber's reaction when Williams opened storage closet revealing dozens of 5-pound cans of lard. According to the account, Weber's eyes widened because quantity of fat in closet exceeded what Hamburg received monthly for civilian use. Weber's memoir recorded Williams's statement that approximately 400 pounds of lard were used for full chicken service. According to the account, Williams acknowledged this sounded like a lot, but explained it was necessary because chicken needed to be submerged completely. Williams added, according to memoir, that oil could be reused several times before breaking down, so process wasn't as wasteful as it appeared. The memoir documented Weber's calculation upon hearing the 400-pound figure.
According to his account, he calculated that 400 pounds of fat equaled sufficient fat for 3,200 German families' monthly rations used in single meal for prisoners. Weber recorded that disparity was incomprehensible. Weber's memoir described Williams's frying demonstration. According to the account, Williams heated oil until it shimmered, placed first pieces with violent sizzling, and explained that temperature dropped when cold chicken was added. Williams stated, according to memoir, that monitoring thermometer and adjusting heat to bring temperature back to 350 degrees was key to good fried chicken. The memoir recorded Weber's question about why meat didn't dry out when boiled in oil. According to the account, Williams explained that high temperature sealed exterior immediately, creating a barrier that trapped moisture inside. Williams stated, according to memoir, that meat actually steamed in its own juices while coating crisped, and that done right, fried chicken was more moist than roasted chicken, even though it seemed like it should be drier. Weber's memoir documented that Williams handed him fork and piece of freshly fried chicken and instructed him to taste it and report his assessment. According to the account, Weber tasted chicken identical to what he had eaten during meals: crispy exterior, moist interior, intense flavor from seasoning. He recorded it as perfect. The memoir documented Weber's statement to Williams that in Germany, such cooking technique would be considered waste due to excessive fat, fuel, and time requirements. According to the account, Weber stated Germans would say roasting was more efficient. Williams's response, recorded in memoir, stated without hostility that Germans would be wrong. According to the account, Williams explained that frying was more efficient than roasting when accounting for results. Roasting took 2 hours while frying took 15 minutes. Roasting dried meat while frying kept it moist. Roasting used subtle flavor while frying delivered bold flavor. Williams stated, according to memoir, that fat usage seemed like waste only if you didn't have enough fat, and that America had plenty of fat, so Americans used it to make better food. Weber's memoir acknowledged that logic was undeniable. According to his account, German cooking emphasized conservation because Germany lacked abundance, while American cooking emphasized results because America possessed abundance. He recorded that techniques reflected different resource environments that produced them. The memoir documented that Weber spent entire day frying chicken under Williams's supervision, learning to maintain temperature, time batches, and judge doneness by color and sound rather than just time. According to the account, Weber learned that American cooking methods produced superior results when resource constraints didn't force conservation. Weber's memoir stated that by evening, when last batch was finished, he had helped fry chicken for 4,800 prisoners using 400 pounds of lard. According to the account, he had learned techniques that would eventually allow him to open restaurants serving same food that had demonstrated American abundance during his captivity.
The memoir recorded that Weber thanked Williams for training, and that Williams shrugged and stated Weber had done good work and could work kitchen detail regularly if he wanted, because help was always needed. Weber's memoir confirmed he wanted and would work kitchen duty for next 6 months, learning everything Williams could teach about American cooking. October 3rd, 1943. Klaus Weber's letter to his wife, dated October 3rd, 1943, preserved in National Archives after being reviewed by Allied censors, documented his attempt to describe what he had experienced during 2 months in American captivity.
The letter stated that Weber was healthy and safe, and that Americans treated prisoners well according to Geneva Convention, and perhaps better than convention required. According to the letter, Weber felt compelled to tell his wife about food that exceeded anything he had eaten in 5 years of military service and exceeded most meals he remembered from civilian life before war. The letter described American fried chicken prepared through method Weber had never witnessed before capture. According to the letter, chicken was coated in seasoned flour and submerged in boiling oil, technique that seemed wasteful by German standards due to enormous oil quantity required, but that produced chicken with crispy exterior and moist interior tasting better than any roasted chicken he had eaten. The letter stated that each prisoner received portions that would feed entire German family for meal. According to the letter, Weber ate 3 pieces of chicken weighing perhaps 12 ounces total, more meat than his wife received as weekly ration for entire family. Weber wrote that he ate this quantity of meat in single meal twice monthly when Americans served fried chicken. The letter acknowledged that descriptions sounded impossible and that his wife might think he was exaggerating. According to the letter, Weber insisted he was telling exactly what he experienced. The letter stated that Americans possessed abundance he never imagined was possible. They used more fat to fry chicken for 1 meal than Hamburg received monthly for all purposes, and served portions that seemed enormous by German standards, but were apparently normal by American standards. The letter documented that Weber had volunteered for kitchen duty to learn how Americans achieved such results. According to the letter, he was learning cooking techniques from Sergeant Williams, Negro man from Alabama, who had been cooking professionally since childhood. Weber wrote that Williams was teaching him that American methods produced superior food because Americans possessed resources allowing them to prioritize results over conservation. The letter stated that experience had made Weber question much of what Germans were taught about America. According to the letter, propaganda had told them Americans were weak, their economy was failing, and their society was corrupt and inefficient. But food Weber ate daily suggested propaganda was lies. Americans who could afford to cook this way for enemy prisoners possessed wealth that made German prosperity seem like poverty, according to letter's assessment. The letter noted that Weber didn't know what this meant for war, and that discussing such topics in letters wasn't permitted. The letter stated that Weber wanted his wife to know he was safe and being treated far better than expected. According to the letter, he thought about her and children constantly and prayed she was receiving adequate food and that bombing hadn't damaged their home. The letter expressed hope to see family again when war ended and stated Weber would have much to tell about what he learned that couldn't be written in letters, but would surprise greatly when they could speak freely. American censor Lieutenant James Morrison's notation on letter, preserved in National Archives, stated that letter contained no security violations and that description of prison camp food served Allied propaganda interests by demonstrating American abundance to German civilians. The notation recommended approval without redaction. The letter reached Weber's wife in Munich 5 weeks later, according to postal records preserved in archives. Her response letter, also preserved in archives, stated that she had difficulty believing descriptions
because nothing described resembled anything available in Soviet stores. According to response, she questioned whether Klaus might be exaggerating because what he described seemed impossible. Weber's subsequent correspondence preserved in archives insisted he wasn't exaggerating and that American abundance was exactly as extreme as described. One letter stated that seeing American supplies had made him understand Soviet propaganda about American poverty was false and that American workers lived better than German officials. Archive records indicate similar letters from thousands of German prisoners were reaching Germany throughout late 1943 and into 1944. Compilation analysis by Office of Strategic Services documented that each letter describing American abundance contributed to undermining German morale through demonstrating that American prosperity was real rather than propaganda exaggeration. May 1945. Klaus Weber's demobilization record preserved in German military archives documented his return to Bremen on May 23, 1945, 2 weeks after Germany's surrender. Weber's daughter's memoir, published in 1995, provided detailed account of his return to Munich. According to the memoir, Weber had been held at Camp Herne for 23 months and had worked in kitchen for 18 of those months, learning American cooking techniques from Sergeant Williams. The memoir stated that Weber had eaten better during captivity than during any period of his adult life, and had learned that American abundance was real, and that German propaganda about American weakness had been lies from beginning to end. The memoir described Germany Weber returned to as completely different from Germany he had left. According to the account, cities were destroyed by bombing, infrastructure was wrecked, food supplies were virtually non-existent, and rationing was stricter than during wartime. People were starving according to the memoir's description. Weber's journey from Bremen to Munich, documented in memoir, required 4 days by train and foot for trip that would have taken 6 hours before war. According to the account, train was crowded with returning soldiers, displaced persons, and refugees. Trains stopped frequently and sometimes ran out of fuel, requiring passengers to wait hours for resupply. The memoir documented Weber's arrival at Munich apartment on May 27th. According to the account, neighborhood had survived relatively intact, but many nearby buildings were damaged or demolished. Weber's wife, Margaret, opened door and was thinner than he remembered, perhaps 20 pounds lighter than when he last saw her in April 1943. According to memoir, her face showed strain of 2 years living under bombing and deprivation. The memoir described emotional reunion and documented that no food was available to offer Weber. According to the account, Margaret apologized and explained rations had been cut again last week, and they were receiving barely enough to survive. She had saved a small amount of bread for his return, but nothing else was available, according to memoir. Weber's son asked him to tell about America, according to memoir. The account documented that son stated letters had described food that sounded impossible and asked whether it was true that Americans really fed prisoners fried chicken. Weber's response, recorded in memoir, acknowledged that everything in letters was true. According to the account, Weber stated Americans fed prisoners better than German civilians or soldiers ate, and that he had learned to cook fried chicken using enormous quantities of oil through working in American kitchen. The memoir documented that Weber's wife shook her head and stated family wanted to believe him, but that what he described seemed impossible. According to the account, she stated no nation could afford such waste while fighting war, and suggested Klaus must be exaggerating. Weber's response, recorded in memoir, insisted he wasn't exaggerating and was understating, if anything. According to the account, Weber stated Americans possessed abundance beyond what he could describe adequately in words. He told family he watched Americans use 400 pounds of fat to fry chicken for one meal, more fat than entire neighborhood received monthly. The memoir documented that Margaret insisted this was impossible and that much fat didn't exist anywhere. According to the account, she suggested Klaus must have miscalculated. Weber's response, recorded in memoir, acknowledged that words couldn't convince family. According to the account, he recognized they had lived under deprivation for 6 years and couldn't imagine abundance on scale he had witnessed. Weber stated, according to memoir, that he had learned to cook fried chicken in American style, and that when food became available again, he would prepare it for family so they would understand everything he told them was true. The memoir documented Weber's recognition that Germany wouldn't recover quickly. According to the account, destruction was too complete and resources were too depleted. It would take years or decades before Germany could produce abundance approaching what he experienced in America. Weber's daughter's memoir stated that her father made decision that evening to emigrate to America when circumstances allowed. According to the account, he would return to country that had shown him what prosperity looked like and would open restaurants serving food he learned to prepare at Camp Herne. The memoir documented that executing the plan required 9 years, but that in 1954 Klaus Weber emigrated to Georgia with family. According to the account, in 1956 he opened Weber's restaurant in small town outside Atlanta, serving fried chicken prepared exactly as Sergeant Williams had taught him in Camp Herne's kitchen 13 years earlier. July 1956, Macon, Georgia. The Macon Telegraph interview with Klaus Weber, published July 28, 1956, documented the German immigrant's remarkable story of learning American cooking as prisoner of war and using those skills to open a successful restaurant in Georgia. According to the published interview conducted by reporter John Harrison, Weber was working in kitchen of Weber's restaurant on Saturday afternoon preparing fried chicken for evening dinner service. The interview noted restaurant had opened 3 months earlier and was small establishment with 20 tables seating 60 customers, but had achieved success through word spreading about German immigrant who served fried chicken, rivaling best Southern cooking despite foreign origins. The interview documented that Weber worked alongside his son Thomas, aged 23, who had learned to cook from his father. According to the article, together they prepared 200 pieces of chicken, enough for approximately 50 customers, using technique Weber stated was exactly what Sergeant Williams had taught him. Harrison's published account described Weber's explanation of technique. According to the interview, Weber stated process involved seasoning chicken, coating it in buttermilk, dredging it in seasoned flour twice, and frying it in oil heated to 350 degrees for 15 minutes. Weber stated, according to article, that result was identical to what he first tasted in August 1943. Crispy exterior, moist interior, bold seasoning creating flavor exceeding anything German cooking produced. The interview documented Weber's confirmation that menu statement about being German prisoner of war who learned American cooking in POW camp was completely true. According to the article, Weber stated he was captured in North Africa in 1943, held at Camp Herne in Texas for 23 months, and volunteered for kitchen duty where he learned American cooking from Sergeant Robert Williams, who was head cook. Harrison's article recorded Weber's explanation of why German prisoner would learn American cooking. According to the interview, Weber stated first time he ate fried chicken in camp, it was best chicken he had ever tasted, better than anything in Germany. He wanted to understand, according to article, how Americans achieved such results, using methods violating everything he had been taught about cooking, so he volunteered for kitchen work specifically to learn techniques. The interview documented Weber's statement that he was now using those techniques to run a successful restaurant in Georgia, which he described, according to article, as more than journey, but as transformation. Weber stated, according to published account, that first meal of fried chicken taught him American abundance was real and that American society produced prosperity Germany had never achieved, despite German claims of superiority. According to article, Weber stated food he ate as prisoner exceeded food he had eaten as free German citizen, and that this knowledge changed how he understood everything.
Harrison's article recorded Weber's assessment that fried chicken had symbolic meaning beyond being good food. According to the interview, Weber stated every piece of chicken he fried represented something he learned as prisoner, that abundance changes everything, that cooking for pleasure rather than survival produces better results, that American society achieved prosperity through freedom rather than control, and that fried chicken was not just food, but proof that democracy works better than dictatorship because freedom produces abundance, making generosity possible even toward enemies. The interview documented Harrison's observation that this was quite philosophical statement about fried chicken. According to the article, Weber responded that it was an accurate statement and that he learned everything important about America through food. Weber stated, according to published account, that taste of fried chicken taught him more about civilization than any book or speech could teach, and that when people ate in his restaurant, they were tasting same food that transformed his understanding of world in August 1943. The article noted that most customers simply enjoyed flavor, but that for Weber, every piece represented proof that American abundance was real and that values creating such abundance were worth adopting. The Macon Telegraph article was reprinted by Wire Services according to newspaper archives and appeared in publications across Georgia and eventually across country. Weber's restaurant records preserved in family archives showed business increased dramatically following publication. According to the records, customers came specifically to hear Weber tell his story, to eat fried chicken with symbolic meaning beyond flavor, and to meet German immigrant who learned American values through American food. Business records preserved in archives showed Weber's restaurant operated successfully for 23 years until Weber retired in 1979. According to the records, thousands of customers ate his fried chicken during those years. Weber's daughter's memoir stated that most customers never knew full story behind recipe, but that her father always remembered August 15, 1943, when he first tasted American fried chicken and learned war was already lost because America possessed civilizational capacity that German discipline couldn't overcome. The story of German POWs encountering American fried chicken reveals fundamental truths about food, culture, power, and the relationship between abundance and civilization. First truth: direct sensory experience overcomes ideology. German prisoners had been taught that Americans were weak and poor. Then they tasted fried chicken prepared with abundance, exceeding anything in German experience. The direct taste contradicted propaganda in ways that couldn't be rationalized away through ideological arguments. You couldn't deny what you had eaten. Second truth: food communicates cultural values more effectively than words. Klaus Weber learned more about American civilization through eating fried chicken than through any propaganda or re-education program. The generous portions, the lavish use of cooking oil, the emphasis on flavor over mere nutrition, every aspect communicated that American society possessed resources so abundant that optimization meant maximizing pleasure rather than conserving supplies. Third truth: abundance transforms everything it touches. American fried chicken wasn't just better tasting than German cooking, it represented an entire approach to life that was possible only in society with sufficient resources that conservation became less important than achieving optimal results. The technique itself could only exist in context of abundance. Scarcity-shaped cooking methods couldn't produce comparable results because scarcity forced conservation that prevented optimization. Fourth truth: generosity toward enemies demonstrates strength rather than weakness. That America could afford to feed enemy prisoners better than Germany, fed its own soldiers, communicated power more effectively than any military demonstration. The casual use of resources that seemed wasteful by German standards proved American capacity to overwhelm through material superiority that made German discipline irrelevant. Fifth truth: cultural assumptions about efficiency reflect scarcity or abundance rather than universal truths. German prisoners discovered that what they had considered wasteful American cooking was actually optimal method that only appeared wasteful to people who had never possessed sufficient resources to use similar approaches. American cooking methods produced superior results precisely because Americans possessed abundance that made conservation less important than optimization. The German prisoners who ate fried chicken in American POW camps experienced something that propaganda could never achieve: direct proof that American abundance was real, sustainable, and overwhelming. They tasted prosperity in form of crispy coating and moist meat seasoned with spices that German cooking rarely used. They ate portions exceeding anything they had received in years of military service. They witnessed casual use of cooking oil in quantities exceeding monthly fat rations for entire German towns. And they learned that the side that could afford to cook this way for enemy prisoners possessed civilizational capacity that no amount of German discipline could overcome. The mathematics of fried chicken were simple and devastating. The side that could use 400 pounds of fat to cook one meal for prisoners was the side that had already won through industrial capacity that made battlefield courage largely irrelevant. Klaus Weber understood this truth by August 15, 1943, when he first tasted American fried chicken at Camp Herne. German leadership refused to accept it until May 1945, when surrender became inevitable. But Weber and thousands of other prisoners knew the outcome years before military collapse made it official, because they had tasted defeat in form of food that proved American abundance was real. Weber carried that knowledge back to Germany in 1945 and tried to explain it to family who couldn't believe his descriptions because deprivation had made abundance unimaginable. He eventually emigrated to America, where he could prove everything he had said was true by opening restaurants serving same fried chicken that had transformed his worldview during captivity. The fried chicken in Weber's restaurant wasn't just food, it was proof. Proof that abundance matters more than ideology.
Proof that freedom produces prosperity that control can never match. Proof that values creating abundance are worth adopting regardless of origin or previous allegiance. German prisoners learned this through food. They ate the proof. They couldn't deny what they had tasted, and the knowledge transformed them from convinced Nazi soldiers into witnesses to American prosperity that propaganda had denied was possible. All because American cooks dropped chicken into hot oil and produced something German prisoners had never imagined could exist. Food prepared for pleasure rather than mere survival, using resources generously because abundance made conservation less important than achieving best possible results, creating flavor that communicated civilizational capacity more effectively than any military demonstration ever could. The taste of American fried chicken in August 1943 taught Klaus Weber that Germany had already lost the war. The decision to open restaurants serving that same fried chicken in 1956 proved he had learned the lesson correctly. And the success of that restaurant for 23 years demonstrated that American values produce prosperity that makes the lesson worth teaching to anyone willing to taste the proof.